Okay, well, thank you. I appreciate that. I know that you gave a briefing to Riverside County Transportation Commission last month, so I appreciate that. And as Assemblyman Linder suggested, our area in the Inland Empire, it is a commuter district. So some areas of the state, not nearly as much as we are. So if we're going to commission this study, we're just very concerned that it's done in a way that would truly reflect how it would affect commuters and drivers. So I would just ask that you be very cognizant of that, and we'll certainly give you our input as we go along, but we want to work with you on this to ensure that the Inland Empire is fairly represented.
We absolutely welcome that input, and just to let you know that Riverside County Transportation Commission presentation was so effective from our perspective that we are sending a similar notice out to the other regional transportation planning agencies around the state, offering to do something similar in those jurisdictions as well. In fact, Sandbag, the San Bernardino Association of Governments, has scheduled one in the coming month.
Thank you, Mr. Kempton, and we'll go and move on to our next presenter, and thank you very much for being here today representing the CTC. Next, we'll have Mr. Randy Iwasaki,
They're all coming up, I think. They were all going to come up at once, I think.
Who? Oh, the whole panel is going to come up. But our next presenter is Mr. Randy Iwasaki, the Executive Director of the Contra Costa Transportation Authority, former Executive Director of Caltrans also.
Sorry.
Good afternoon, Mr. Iwasaki. Thank you for coming today.
Thank you, Chairman Frazier and members of the committee, for inviting me here today. My name is Randy Iwasaki, and I work for the Contra Costa Transportation Authority. With me today in the back is Lindsay Willis. She's the Director of External Affairs for our agency, and then Jack Hall. He's our Intelligent Transportation System, Autonomous Vehicle, Connected Vehicle Program Manager. That's a long handle, and I'll tell you why that's important on the next slide. So no matter where I go in California to speak, my board has asked me to talk a little bit about what the Contra Costa Transportation Authority is and does. Where I'm here today to talk, I'm representing the Self-Help Counties, a coalition on the Sales Tax Authority. We're one of the 20 counties in California that uses sales tax to fund transportation. We're also the Congestion Management Agency by law, so the 9 Bay Area counties, each county, 7 of the 9 counties have a Congestion Management Agency responsibility. We do that for the county. We program the STIP. We prioritize transportation for Clean Air Act dollars, and we're developing the comprehensive countywide transportation plan. So in 1988, we were not the first. Santa Clara was the first county to pass a sales tax initiative. We were one of maybe the second or third. But that was passed. In those days, it was a simple majority. And we passed that in 88. And so in 1988, using 1988 dollars, we raised about $1 billion. But the difference here between how the state programs their projects and how we program ours is we have a transportation expenditure plan that the voters look at and they like and they hopefully vote yes on. And so that transportation expenditure plan is our commitment to the voters on what we're going to deliver over that first 20-year period. And so it delivered a lot of great projects. And so in 2004, the board, knowing that the measure was going to cease in end of 2008, went it back out to the voters. And Will and I are debating on who made this up, but promises made, promises kept. We delivered on our commitment, and over 71% of the voters in Contra Costa passed an extension of that sales tax, this time for 25 years. It generates about $2.7 billion in 2004 dollars. And there's some great projects in there, and you see the fourth bore of the Caldecott Tunnel. That's about a $420 million project. Project-wise, we also are investing about $1.3 billion extending BART 10 miles and widening Highway 4 from an antiquated 4-lane facility to an 8-lane freeway. That's modern. It's got all the ramps. 7 of the 8 bridges will be replaced. And it's going to allow for mobility in eastern part of Contra Costa, which has supplied about 8% of the housing needs over the last 2 decades for the Bay Area. And so it went from the 10th worst commute in the United States, hopefully after we're done, to one of the better commutes. This is what we do. We recently, our board approved the ferry boat reestablishing ferry service in Contra Costa from Richmond to San Francisco. That's funded out of one of the programs, in this case, program number 28. We anticipate about $45 million over the 25 years to fund operations. So we have a partnership with the WETA agency in San Francisco, and they're in the process of ordering our boats. That ferry service should go back in service in 2017, so we're excited about that. We also deliver a capital program for Contra Costa. So we plan, we environmentally clear, we design, we have the county do right-of-way, and then we do what we call AAA. We advertise, award, and administer the construction projects on the state highway system and the interstate system in Contra Costa. So in many counties in California, you'll see, when you see a project on the state highway system, it's Caltrans running those projects. In our case, in our county, we actually AAA those projects. So Assemblyman Baker, you asked about cost-cutting items. That's where you get more cost certainty. We're in charge of the project. I'm not saying anything bad about my old team, but we're in charge, and I'm responsible, because if we overrun, I get into big trouble, and so I'd rather do it myself and get into trouble. 20 self-help counties in California generates about $4 billion. 81% of the population live in those counties that tax themselves. Many of you represent those counties, and it's a very, very great tool to get transportation improvement projects and programs going. We have local accountability. That's, I think, the difference, is we answer to the taxpayers in our county, and we want to make sure that we deliver on our commitments. Otherwise, we won't get another sales tax measure passed. The next slide, there's a funding chart. This is how big the sales tax is for the 20 counties. So in California, this is a chart that we borrowed from the CTC presentation. About 65% of the revenues generated for projects at a local level, 13% by the feds, 22% by the state. When we go back to Washington, D.C., we have a saying: the feds have 13% of the dollars, but you got 80% of the rules. So either raise the revenue or lower the amount of regulations, because it's not working when you're so out of balance. So these are the issues. You can read that chart as well as I can. But we need to make sure that we have more than, and Will and I worked hard on Proposition 1B. I'm proud to say that when Governor Schwarzenegger first was elected, one of the things that Secretary Sonny Wright McPeak and I did, because I was the interim director at the time, is we worked on this thing called Go California. It was a focused initiative to have funds available to reduce congestion in California, to keep our comparative business advantage for our state. And so it morphed into Proposition 1B, but the point here is it's only one time. It's a one-time blip in the funding issues, and we made some great progress there. So this is the chart, by the way, and I'm just putting this up. This is the funding chart for California. You can find it on Caltrans' website. Before I left, I asked them to put this chart up because it's very, very complex, and Stephen Keck and Norm Ortega and some of the others in the budget shop at Caltrans can tell you exactly what all those arrows mean. I don't know what it means, but I can tell you that I'm one of those bottom boxes, and that's what I care about, is how much dollars we're going to get from the great state of California to build our infrastructure in Contra Costa. So you saw this. These are some factoids about the price of neglect. I know Will went through it with the fine-tooth comb. What we're doing now is we're developing our comprehensive countywide transportation plan. We have about $29 billion worth of project and program needs in Contra Costa. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to raise revenue to help make a dent in that. And so we went out and polled our voters in Contra Costa. Their first issue is fix it first. Take care of what we have. The second issue, because of the recent BART strike, is we need better connectivity to BART. So don't leave me when the BART train stops and lets me out at Pleasant Hill BART station and the bus takes off and I'm waiting for another 15 minutes. Have some connection protection. So working on some projects that we think using technology can help. But the third one was they wanted to get rid of gridlock. Fight gridlock for us. And I knew you in Southern California have it worse off. We complain in Northern California, but I've been in Southern California. It's way, way worse there. So what do we need in the future from all of you? We need a stable, reliable source of funding. What happens is when you have funding that peaks and valleys, it makes it hard for us to program projects. We get projects ready to go. ready to go to construction. As Will was saying, allocations, they may do an allocation plan. I can remember when they ceased allocating. Those projects that are ready to go to construction, what happens is the environmental document gets stale. The permits, you have to re-look at the permits. There might be a different species that has been listed, and it just costs more money. So a stable funding source allows us to get our program out much quicker and much more efficiently. And we always need more transportation funding. It hasn't been raised. The excise tax on gasoline on the federal level, 1993, on the state level, 1994. William Jefferson Clinton was the president the last time the feds raised that excise tax on the federal level. And then, as Will said, there's other viable revenue options. He's looking at a road charge fee and all those kinds of things. Hey, we're behind whatever it takes to get us that reliable funding source that we can make better decisions on our projects for. And then last thing on this advanced innovation with less regulation, there are some procurement tools that we could use on a local level that would help give us more cost certainty, design build, allow us to use and choose our own agencies that we want to use to do the inspection. There's CMGC, construction manager, general contractor. You have better price certainty. We'd love to participate in some of those innovative procurement methods. We don't finance or fund our program. We finance our program in Contra Costa. So we're a AA plus agency, rated agency. We go out and sell tax-exempt municipal bonds on Wall Street. And so we take a conservative look at our future revenue based on a 40% split, 40% for projects, 60% for programs, and then we bond against that. And so in 2012, we sold $225 million worth of sales tax-exempt municipal bonds at the lowest interest rate in the history of the bond market. And so instead of having $61 million out of that 40% for projects, because we sold at such a low interest rate, we're able to get now $161 million. So we added $100 million of bonding capacity. So we don't fund, we finance our program, and so we bring the projects forward. So we're delivering a 25-year project program in 10 years. And then last thing I would tell you is that we have just recently set up the largest secure autonomous vehicle test bed in the United States, if not the world. It's about 5,000 acres at the Concord Naval Weapons Station. And we're also a connected vehicles. We want to get a connected vehicle test site pilot project. And the reason why I'm saying this is one of the things that we're trying to do is oftentimes we build our plans based on technology we know today. What we're trying to do is we're trying to build our plans based on technology that's going to be here tomorrow. And that's the third phase of wow. Wow, they really got it. And I think that what we're trying to do is we're trying to change the world. And so in doing that, we're going to have to find new and innovative ways of funding these new technologies. And so that's something that we're working on as well in Contra Costa. So I only have 10 minutes, and I'm here to answer any of your questions. Thank you.
Any questions of Mr. Iwasaki? Ms. Baker?
If I may, thank you, Mr.
Please.
Chairman. First of all, thank you, Mr. Iwasaki, for coming, and you do a good job of making CCTA look good.
Thank you.
They do good work. And you mentioned that in this self-help county, one of the areas that you work on is BART. And I see in your presentation both carpool rideshare and improvements in BART service. And, of course, much of what I hear for East Bay BART riders is if they don't have a parking space by 7:45 in the morning, they're driving. They're on the roads or they're parking on our regional streets. Yet investments in supporting parking lots is not usually seen as a way to support transit. Can you talk a little bit about how, as you're looking at innovative ways to fund local transportation projects, that might include supporting infrastructure around our BART stations that may help cars, but in the end helps riders get on BART and be able to use BART and get off our roads?
Thank you for that question. We're actually we do fund parking spots. We funded the one at Richmond, and that was a very successful project. We're also looking at technology. I briefly mentioned it. One of the things we're looking at in partnering with UC Berkeley and the California Department of Transportation is using technology so that the BART driver, a passenger signals the BART driver. And we don't want to take his or her attention off doing what they need to do, but they signal that they need a ride. They're going to get off at Pleasant Hill BART Station. And so what they do is through technology is they signal the bus that's going to come and wait for the passengers to wait because there's a passenger. So we call it connection protection. Dynamic routing or dispatch is another way of dealing with that we're trying to use technology is change your route. So if you're not going to pick anybody up at the next bus stop, but you have somebody at a different location nearby, that let's say it wouldn't be a bus BART stop in this case, but a different place, go pick those folks up. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to entice the people to be able to connect to BART so that they have that connection. We're also using technologies, a smartphone application called Karma. And so what Karma does, it mimics this phenomenon on the West Coast called casual carpooling, and on the East Coast it's called slugging. And so what we're trying to do is hook drivers up with riders. And so many times when I leave my neighborhood in Walnut Creek, there may be somebody nearby that wants a ride to where I'm going, but I just don't know it. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to mine technology using the smartphone application to mirror that phenomenon of why do you stand at a BART station, get two people get in a complete stranger's car. Why? Because the incentive is you go across the bridge for free for the driver and for the riders. And so we're looking at technology there, and then we do fund parking.
Well, great, thank you. It's exciting to hear that you're looking at those technologies. I hope that our greater agencies that we're hearing from today, and we've already heard from, will be doing the same, that we can help them do that.
Thank you. Mr. Linder, please.
No, thank you. Two questions. First off, in Contra Costa, do they say the before the freeway number, or is that just a...
It depends on where I am. If I'm in Southern California, I say the.
Okay, so that... No?
The 80.
Well, with that question down, thank you for your advocacy and for your help with in standing up for some of the self-help counties. How do we make sure that it remains equitable? I mean, I know that self-help counties. We got 3 representatives from Riverside County now. We're a self-help county. Mm-hmm. How do we make sure that we've carried some of the weight in the past for the rest of the state's transportation infrastructure? How do we make sure that self-help counties that it stays fair, and maybe are there any kind of rewards that self-help counties can get for carrying some of that weight?
I don't want to get crossways with the rural task force person, so I'm going to phrase my answer this way. So in Proposition 1B, there was a state and local partnership component. There was $1 billion, and that was to leverage sales tax dollars, basically. Will Kempton made a career out of leveraging state dollars with that initial sales tax, so much so that he keeps putting it back in those in subsequent legislation. So that's a very powerful tool. Is number one, state and local partnership, leverage the existing sales tax with state dollars. The state Caltrans could do more of the leveraging piece on the shop, and so where you in Riverside County have a project, many times, or most of the time, it's multi-funded. There's very few single-funded projects anymore. And so we try to leverage our dollars with state dollars and federal dollars, and I think that's how you incentivize passing a sales tax. It's very, very important. And then create those incentives on the state side for us, sales tax counties, to go ahead and apply for those and make it a competitive. I'm willing to compete with Riverside or with San Bernardino or Los Angeles County anytime. And I may not win every one, but I may win a few. And that's really the incentive on passing those sales tax. Plus, as I mentioned up there, we represent about 81% of the population of California in those 20 counties.
Mr. Iwasaki, could you share with a funding formula that you've mentioned before in our presence, the 5-to-1?
So we concocted a deal with our board that we were going to go to the California Transportation Commission. We called it the 5-for-1 deal because the CMIA, the Corridor Mobility Improvement Account dollars, there was in that fund package of Proposition 1B, I think it was $4.5 billion. There was savings because we were getting great bids in those days on these projects. I mean, they were so low, it was just great. And so there were savings. So we went out and we actually made an application to fund the Sand Creek interchange there on State Route 4. That thing would still be having a steel cable with a temporary light flying over it to this day, but we got an allocation of $25 million competing for CMIA, so Corridor Mobility Improvement Account money. So on the second wave of savings, we went out and we said, we'll give you a 5-for-1 deal. So if we could get $44 million, we'll put that on State Route 4. We'll pull $44 million of measure money off, and we'll fund. We have almost designed State Route 4 through the Interstate 680 interchange there. So we're going to widen from 4 lanes to 6, and that pavement is wearing out. We'll replace the pavement. We're a little short now. So we would have funded that project fully, and then we would have funded the Route 84 study, which is important for goods movement in the 580, 84, 680 kind of Tri-Valley area. We would have funded that. And then there was Vasco Road, which is still waiting for an allocation by the county of Contra Costa. we would have funded that project, and there was another project that we would have funded. We called it the 5-for-1 deal, and we were unsuccessful. But that was a 5-for-1 deal. So leveraging is a great, powerful tool. Just you got to use it.
And by leveraging your resources, you've actually shortened the life expectancy of the measure by 15 years?
Yeah, we've accelerated a 25-year on the project side because we bond against future revenue. Is you'd rather have the project now than wait 25 years for the projects. No different than buying a house. You can either mortgage your house, or you can save up and your family's grown, and then you buy your house 25 years, 30 years from now. Most people take a mortgage out and try to pay for their house. We're trying to do the same thing for projects. The value of a project isn't planning it. It isn't talking about it. It's actually building it and let the people have better mobility, safer mobility. That's the benefits of transportation improvement projects. And that's the mantra that we have at the Contra Costa Transportation Authority.
Thank you so much, Mr. Iwasaki.
Thank you.
So we'll move on to Matt Robinson. He's the legislative advocate for the California Transit Association. Good afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for having me today, and members of the committee. My name is Matt Robinson. I'm a legislative advocate at the California Transit Association, and I'm regretting not bringing a PowerPoint presentation today because they've been so good, and they just provide so much information. Okay, good. Well, that was what I was betting on, but it came true. Anyway, we represent a majority of the state's transit agencies, as well as the regional agencies, suppliers, manufacturers, and other businesses that support them. I was asked today by the committee to provide a more detailed overview of transit funding in California, as well as some context of what happens if we don't find some additional funding for our operations and capital investments. Before I get going on that, I just very quickly, last year, I'll say 2013, approximately 1.4 billion trips were taken on transit systems in the state. That's about 8 billion miles traveled. We were second only to the state of New York in that regard. We expect in this state to add about 5 million people in the next 10 years, which is about half of the population of LA County. And so if you think about freeways in LA County right now, it's not going to get any better. And so we think that transit is a viable opportunity and a solution towards reducing congestion on our state's roadways. It's also a key element of the SB 375 Sustainable Community Strategies and the implementation of those. Currently, we're funded by a mix of federal, state, and local funding. We get about $1.7 billion a year from the federal government. That's spread out across about 200 agencies throughout the state. We receive a portion of the sales tax revenue on diesel fuel. That nets us about $400 million annually, and that goes out on a formula distribution. Probably the most favorable funding source by our members because it's predictable, and you can build your operating and your capital programs around that. We also received some bond fundings as part of Prop 1B. We got about $5 billion out of that, and then also $1 billion or so out of Prop 1A, the high-speed rail bond. I'll call it a statewide funding source, but I think there's an argument to be made that it's actually local. We get 0.25% of the statewide sales tax on all goods and services throughout the state, which generates about $1.3 billion, and that's sent to the counties, who then distribute that funding accordingly to their transit agencies. And I should point out that some of that funding can actually be used for local streets and roads. We got some funding from Cap and Trade this year. It's not a lot. It's not nearly enough. We got $50 million in terms of the grant program and the formula program for transit. We also got 15% of all revenues going forward, and so we will see what that materializes into over the next couple of years, and that may very well provide a nice slug of investment into transit in California. But right now, it's very unknown, and so we have to continue to seek other funding solutions in order to address some of our unmet needs. Finally, local funding is pretty critical. As you've heard from a lot of folks up here, local sales tax measures provide a lot of the funding in California. In fact, the majority of that, about $3.7 billion are expected this fiscal year from local sales tax, and a large portion of that goes to fund transit projects. So we're very grateful for our local partners and our agencies. We also get property tax revenue, and fares are a large portion of our local revenue. That's about $3.5 billion a year in terms of our operating budgets. So unmet needs, what are we looking at? 10 years, $71 billion. We are ranked right up there with streets and roads and the shop. That also includes kind of our projected capital expansion projects over the 10 years, which doesn't take into account the full life cycle of a sustainable community strategy or regional transportation plan. Those are 30-year plans. But in capturing that, we do have a need that definitely matches our other modes in the state. Our operating costs continue to rise. Construction costs are increasing. About half of our bus fleet has passed its useful life, and by 2020, 1/3 of all of our non-rail assets will be not meeting the definition of a state of good repair. And so, as that just continues to expound on itself, we will that unmet funding needs is going to grow. I mean, you've seen the presentations, I think, at the various conferences and in front of you in the past about what happens to that 66% or 66 score for pavement preservation. If we don't do anything about that in the next few years, it's going to get worse, and the need is going to grow. The same thing is true in transit. We continue to put things into our backlog of preservation, and what starts out as 2 buses becomes 4 the next year and 6 the next year, and before you know it, those unmet needs continue to grow. And so we're going to look with some of our partners here at the table over this year as transportation funding is kind of the hot topic, or one of them. We're grateful to this body and for the work that it's planning on doing in looking at some of those options. We're very excited about the potential for the road user charge, also for what managed lanes may bring to those corridors that don't have those. As you know, as I stated at the outset, we see ourselves as a solution, or one of the solutions, to congestion relief. And so that being said, I think I'll stop and turn it over to some of our local folks, if that's all right, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Anybody left? Mr. Robinson? So, Mr. Turner, welcome, and please share with us your agency that you represent.
Thank you. It's Michael Turner with the Los Angeles County Metropolitan Transportation Authority. And on behalf of the Board of Directors of the MTA, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak before you today. We have many opportunities before us with respect to the future of our transportation system in this state. The state has taken bold steps recently to address many of our major challenges, from the initiation of the high-speed rail project, implementation of the cap-and-trade programs, and most recently initiating efforts to take a serious look at a mileage-based user fee, not to mention addressing the need to address our state of good repair needs. Local agencies, and here I'm mainly referring to the counties in California who've adopted sales taxes for transportation, combined account for half of the transportation expenditures in the state. And you saw what Randy mentioned. This trend will continue if the aspiring counties are successful in passing future measures. We are one of those counties. We're looking to potentially place a measure on the ballot in 2016. And just to give you some example, one sales tax, half-cent sales tax in LA County generates about $700 million a year. So that could be a significant infusion of funds into transportation. In Los Angeles County, Measure R is the last sales tax that was approved by the voters in 2008. That measure is now in full swing, and through Measure R, we are doubling the transit system in Los Angeles County. This has also allowed us to leverage significant federal funds. In fact, we have 2 large full funding grant agreements, and we are in the President's budget for a third. Combined, those 2 full funding grant agreements will bring billions of dollars and tens of thousands of jobs into Los Angeles County, and those have statewide benefits. We've also been able to access major TIFIA loans for our projects. These are essentially subsidized loans from the federal government that is a cheaper form of borrowing and allows us to use our capital more efficiently. Through that effort, we now have over $14 billion in investments in transit projects, highway projects, vehicle acquisitions, transit line rehabilitation projects, and facility upgrades in Los Angeles County. This also means we are making great progress in implementing the LA County's portion of the Sustainable Community Strategy. But it's important to note the state is our partner in that effort, as they are with all self-help counties, and we need them to continue that partnership. We're working with Caltrans on the key highway improvements throughout the county, and are jointly studying future major freeway improvement projects, such as the 2 segments of the 710 corridor and the High Desert corridor. The state is also a partner by contributing funding to the transit projects through commitments of funds from various sources, including Propositions 1A and 1B, STIP funds, as well as its ongoing commitment of transit operating assistance funds. We now look forward to the opportunities that are available through the Cap and Trade program. I would also note that the Caltrans District Director sits on our board as an ex officio non-voting member, and we welcome the active participation of Caltrans. That's a very important issue for us. As a state, though, we are still facing significant challenges. As you've heard, the gas tax is no longer a good model for funding our system, and California has taken the bold step of looking at a mileage-based user fee system through the CTC, and thank you, Will Kempton, for leading that effort. I'd also like to take note of the efforts undertaken by Secretary Kelly to convene stakeholders to come together to discuss key policy issues and develop solutions through the CTIP process. We strongly support this process and believe it's a good example of how the state can partner with other stakeholders in California. That effort has borne fruit in developing the framework for the mileage-based user fee demonstration project, as well as developing a pricing policy for the state. But California always succeeds when we choose to think big, and that's where we should start when we were thinking about the future of our transportation system. We need to start with a bold vision and figure out which level of government is best poised to address a given challenge and how best to fund and deliver those improvements. The governor has laid out a vision for high-speed rail, and our board strongly supports that. Northern and Southern California have entered into agreements with the state that outline the improvements needed to integrate the project into that area, and that's a good model for how we can work together to implement a statewide project by partnering with the local agencies. Through those MOUs, we are able to identify what we call the building blocks, or things that are needed to ultimately establish high-speed rail but can provide connectivity and utility today. And in Los Angeles County, we're working very closely with the High-Speed Rail Authority on what we call the run-through tracks at Union Station. And this is a facility that will allow trains to pass directly through Union Station, having to stop, turn around, and go out another direction. While that's also needed for ultimately high-speed rail, it will provide benefits to commuters today. Union Station is the hub of rail transit in the western United States. It's not only the hub of Metrolink, it's the hub of Metro's transit system, and also the intercity rail line in our region. It's also important to note that Amtrak also provides service out of Union Station that reaches Northern California, Seattle, Chicago, and New Orleans. Metro rail service from Union Station reaches North Hollywood, Pasadena, East Los Angeles, Long Beach, and in the not-too-distant future, as the Expo line opens, Santa Monica, and with the extension of the Foothill extension of the Gold Line out into the San Gabriel Valley. That doesn't even begin to count the over 1,000 buses that access Union Station every day. So just imagine a day when high-speed rail reaches Los Angeles. People from throughout Southern California will be able to access high-speed rail without having to get in their cars. Those same opportunities exist in the Bay Area through opportunities at the Transbay Terminal, BART, Muni, and improvements to Caltrain. The state, we think, also needs to continue its stewardship of the state highway system by ensuring that the system is well maintained, and we must all work together to identify how to achieve that objective. We've made progress, and as I mentioned, in developing a pricing policy for the state, and we look forward to the enactment of legislation this year to put that to finalize that issue. Additionally, we believe it's important to maintain all delivery options, including extending the authorization to use public-private partnerships. That's a key issue in some of the highway projects in our region, so we look forward to that. And in all pricing situations, it's important to note that the fiduciary responsibilities on the project should stay with the agency that takes the risk on the project. Many of these projects require bonding and financing, and if the local agency is taking the risk by initiating the project, sponsoring the project, managing it, and then financing it, then the local agency should maintain control of the revenues. The high-speed rail system and the state highway system will ultimately connect all of our regions, and we need to ensure that the regions are empowered to address our mutual goals in a way that works best for each region. In Southern California, we've worked very hard to establish partnerships at the regional level, and we must give credit to the Southern California Association of Governments in this regard, because they played a very key role in bringing people together to develop consensus on these issues. That has led to the development. This actually started with the implementation of Metrolink, but it has also led to the formation of a freight strategy in Southern California, and it has also enabled us to work together to resolve a number of issues throughout the county related to the freeway system. And then just to put a point on some of these issues, I think we've made a lot of good progress, but we need to move forward on the mileage-based user fee. And in that regard, I think there's a principle that could be accepted by all agencies throughout California, which is that if we're going to charge people based on where they drive, we should be allocating the funds, or if we're going to charge people based on how much they drive, we should also allocate the funds based on where they drive. We need to make sure that we're very careful in looking at how we move forward on authorizing sales taxes in the future. Whether or not it's warranted, there is still a healthy amount of skepticism with relation to the possibility of funds being diverted to Sacramento. Voters at the local level have shown that they will approve local measures if they know that the funds are going to stay in the area, stay locally controlled, and will fund projects in their area. So that's an important principle that we will be looking to as we move forward. I mentioned the opportunities on the tolling programs. We're looking forward to legislation being enacted there. And I think with that, I will conclude and turn over to Randy.